Tall skyscrapers, fancy skylines have fascinated people across the world. Cities across the world race to build super tall skyscrapers and create a skyline to signal their developed status. In India, a few cities like Mumbai have rules that allow for tall buildings. Bengaluru, however, has had strict rules that prevented people from building tall. Floor area ratio, or FAR, is the ratio of a building's total floor area to the size of the land on which it is built. The range of FAR in Bengaluru is between 1.75 to 3.35 based on different parameters like plot sizes, road width, etc. Right? However, transit-oriented development rules were notified recently, which provided an FAR of about 4, which means you could build 4 times the size of your plot in height if your plot was within a train or a transit zone. So it allowed for more transit-oriented development. But in order to mop up more own revenue to fund land acquisition and develop the city, the Karnataka Town and Country Planning Amendment Bill 2024 was passed early this year, which allows for the developers to obtain additional floor area ratio up to around 60% more beyond what is normally allowed by paying at least 40% of the guidance value. It's a very simple amendment bill which also says this money shall be utilized only for the purposes of land acquisition and public infrastructure development, and that it shall not be utilized for repairs and maintenance and miscellaneous works at any time. It also says that the premium for money shall be deposited in a separate head of account with the planning authority or the urban local authority which issues the premium FAR. Right? This was done ostensibly because this scheme fetched around 2,000 crores in Mangaluru, where it is already operational. On the face of it, this appears to solve two problems, mop up own revenue for development and provide a nice skyline and accommodate more people, increase density for the building geeks to ogle as well, right? Is this bill really going to do what it claims? We talked to Dr. Anjali Mohan, an expert on land use and master plan, to understand more about this issue. So Anjali, thanks for being on the show once again. Last time we had a very interesting discussion around master planning and all of these things. I will link that in the show notes for the people to go and kind of learn more about how our master planning is done and what the gaps are and other things. But this particular one, kind of like a part of the master planning process, is to understand density and things like that, right? So this FAR amendment bill that has been included in the Town and Country Planning Act recently in this year, it basically tries to incentivize people to build taller and collect more revenues, right? That's broadly what it is. But do you think this is this good or bad?
So wearing my planner's hat, I'm not going to say it is good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. It depends on what lens you're looking at. Okay, so if you're saying that it is going to help us achieve compact development while also, helping the local governments ramp up their revenue sources, then prima facie it's good. Yeah, I'm using the word compact development rather than vertical development. But I think the question is that all that it is will that be the only manifestation? The first one, will it actually result in tall buildings? Number one. Two, having resulted in tall, let's just assume that yes, it will go in for tall buildings, but that is not necessarily compact development. Two, if we are going in for tall buildings, and that does happen, let's assume, will it really fetch revenues to the government? I think those are the two questions, taking cue from what you're saying.
So no, I just wanted the viewers to understand the difference between compact and vertical tall. What's that distinction you are making?
So compact development is when a city does not sprawl, right? Your urban development is not sprawling. Rather, it is contained. The city is small in size. For the government to services in terms of basics infrastructure, definitely it costs less. And the government has complete control over, or the planning agency, the government agencies, not agency, has knows how the city is growing and is able to proactively steer that development such that compact development is that people don't travel long distances for work. Most of their basic needs and everyday needs are met within their living spaces, that I don't need to pull out my car to buy a liter of milk if I want it suddenly, that I can walk up to the neighborhood shop and I can buy my vegetables, the daily consumables, right? And that's what a compact, and even for work, that I don't have to spend 2 hours in my car reaching my workplace. So compact development is all about being compact, right? Now, the question is, if a city goes vertical, is it necessarily compact? Not in our case, because your city is anyway sprawling, because that sprawl is a result of your land economy. Land on the periphery is cheaper, is available to begin with, is much cheaper. And I think I mentioned this in my last talk with you also, that I would definitely want to stay in Jayanagar or a MG Road or a Residency Road, but I can't afford it. So I go and I buy plots where, one, they are available, two, they are they suit my pocket, and therefore, and that's where I will set up my home or my work center or whatever else. And that's how our cities are growing. Essentially, it's largely a function of the real estate development. So, without moving away, I'm not too sure if this extra FAR or the premium FAR that the government is offering at a certain percentage of the guidance value, and that only 0.6 capping it at 60% of the existing FAR, whether this will actually result in vertical development such that the city is a compact city. No, it may add to vertical development, and I'll say why I'm saying may. And whether it will generate revenues, that's highly doubtful.
Why do you say it cannot generate revenues?
Okay, so let's go back. Let's from a common man's from a very commonsensical understanding. How is the built? Who are the ones who are adding to the built form of the city, right? Or who will avail this premium FAR? As has been reported in many newspapers, it will be availed by the large developer who is more or less operating in a very formal, is at least complying with formal development more or less. Yeah, formalities of development more or less. But our cities are created really by the small developer, very, very small developer on a 30-40 plot. And today that's what we are seeing, especially on the fringes. On a 30-40 plot, you have 6 to 8 houses, small flats, which are adding to the housing stock, which is getting consumed. So in many ways, these are all building violations. You're not allowed to construct that much on the plot, but you're constructing because there are no consequences to it. There is in your head the idea that at one point it will get regularized. The akrama sakrama is there. And therefore, when it gets regularized, I will think of paying that amount and saying, okay, let me regularize this. A khata, B khata, nothing matters, right? So that's the developer. And for him, why will he buy a premium FAR, him or her? Why will they buy a premium FAR? You are anyways where you're allowed 1.6, you're able to go up till 3 and 4, violating. And there are no consequences. So I will just go ahead and do it. And I don't really care about the premium FAR as and when this will happen. And that's what is also getting reported. So many lakh people came forward and regularized the last time they were given an opportunity against a fee. And then also the premise was that the local government will have a revenue source. So the fundamental point I'm making over here is that cities are created largely by the mid segment and the very small segment developer, right? And you see it everywhere. You see it even in planned areas like, let's say, Jayanagar, where a 60-40 plot is getting sold, and there is a lot of redevelopment happening because there is a demand for housing. There's a lot of redevelopment happening, and in this redevelopment, I will get a plan sanction for, let's say, 3 floors, and I add 1 more floor to it. As and when, and there are no consequences. Even if I have to pay money to regularize it, that is much, much less than the rental I will get out of it. So for me, And because the price of land is so high, it's obnoxiously high in most parts of the city. In the words of a developer that I spoke to recently, he says there is no way we can even cut even without violating. The price of land is so high. So we have to violate just to cut even. Then if I want my profits, I have to violate a lot more.
Now, here's the thing between the going back to the compact versus vertical. We've also observed that a lot of townships are coming up on the outskirts because the land is cheap, like you said, right? And most of this is where, if you look at all the tall buildings coming up, they are not even coming in the center of the city, like you said. It's coming somewhere in the corner. Now, the claim is that in Mangalore, they were able to mop up 2,000, 3,000 crores because of this thing. And they also mention in the bill that this money it will go to the local, urban local area, the urban local body or the planning authority is what they say, depending on whose area it falls under.
Correct.
Right. And the claim is that it has mopped up 2,000-3,000 crores in Bangalore where this kind of a scheme has been developed. Of course, they are willing to let go of the small developer with all the violations and do the same thing. But they want to tap into the premium. They use the word premium just for the large developer and try to mop up more there. Now, I don't know if giving some developers alone this premium FAR is going to actually solve any problem other than mopping up revenue. This looks like only a way to mop up revenues rather than any other functional improvement in the space. It also seems to suggest that you cannot use this for fixing potholes and maintenance work and other things. You can only use it for whatever they call as improvement. How do you read that piece of it? If money is not going to be used, it's only going to be used for whatever they call as improvement, it probably means they'll put a wider road for him, and it can be used for land acquisition, which probably means they will use that money to acquire more land to make a wide road for him. So they're basically allowing the large developer to pay for improvements for their property alone and not necessarily going into a wider pool for improvement. Is how I'm reading it.
So the money that is going to come in through this, I haven't looked at the Mangalore case. In fact, I only came to know about it when I read the newspapers that the scheme was really operating there. Premium FARs are a very important planning tool, and many cities have experimented with it and they have gained through the process. But it's a question of this is not operating in vacuum. There is a context to it, and that context is really about the big developer versus the small developer. The akrama sakrama, the whole angle of the akrama sakrama, violations that do not get penalized, as well as these are some of the contexts within which it is operating. Now, the money will be used for land acquisition and developing new infrastructure, not in the maintenance of existing infrastructure. It's not for maintenance. It's for developing new infrastructure. The money that is going to be mopped up.
Inside that area where the FAR is being given, I think is what it means.
Yes. In the zone where the FAR is being traded, right? Actually, the whole idea of even there has been a lot of conversation around TDRs, around premium FARs. These are planning tools for a government to use, not so much for revenue. Revenue, of course, is very critical, but actually to direct growth in a certain direction. Right. So, for example, I will select zone A and zone B, and I'll put a restriction saying that all TDRs or FARs that are applicable in zone A will be consumed in zone B because I feel that I need to increase the density of zone B. You understand what I'm saying? Is that coming? So, therefore, I outline the selling zone. I'll create some sort of, so it requires us to look at the city in its entirety, analyze how the spatial growth is happening, and then say, okay, how do I want to direct the growth of this city and the various zones within the city? Incidentally, Sathya, we did an analysis of the building plan sanctions. And that did get published in the Citizen Matters. We did a 2-part analysis of the building plan sanction, and the data we used was what was available on the BBMP website. And we looked at the zone-wise. It's a very granulated analysis that we did. And one of the things we said in that was that across the city, as per those sanctions, right? And those, we looked at some 44,000 odd data points. Of that, 30% was logged because the data isn't extremely bad. shape. But whatever we did analyze, what we said was that of those, only 5% are in 4 floors and above.
My God.
The remaining across the city is in 4 floors and below, right? So that's where I say the small developer, right? Now, even in that, I think it was Mahadevpura zone where maximum it goes up to is about 18%, 4 floors and above, right? So what I'm saying is that here, I agree, you want to tap into the larger developer. You catch the big fish, you will get big money. The thing is, at what cost are you doing it? Right? It's not that, okay, now, and also the whole idea that there is a science behind building bylaws. The FARs you give are very, very closely linked to public health, to safety, to ease of living, to access to natural resources. And that's how buildings are actually constructed, right? And you calculate all of this. It is an extremely scientific method. You actually apply it when you're doing your planning. You take a road, you apply. There are many tools now for us to apply this. You see how the shadow of the building is falling, what is happening. If a building of so many floors comes in, if we give this FAR, if I give lesser FAR. So that's how you determine, apart from the width of the road and the plot size, you also see how it actually applies on the ground. And none of this is, so you see, at what cost are you going to ramp up this? You're going to stress the city, the already basic services. And if this is going to happen in the outskirts, which is where the large developer is, then anyways, there is no infrastructure there.
This is a very important point, because while we understand the core essence of building compactness and vertical bringing dividends, this bill is so shallow in its construction that it just says you are allowed up to 60%, and the minimum we will charge is the guidance value of 40% of the guidance value, and that's about it. It doesn't, and it says you shall use it only for development in the zone. Not even the, it doesn't even use the word zone, in the local planning area's jurisdiction. So if it's BBMP, it could be in the entirety of BBMP. But it is
the local planning area of the BDA, which is much beyond the BBMP.
Correct. So now that's a larger area. Now it says, I get the feeling, like I said, is that this policy has left out so many things unsaid that it almost appears to me that very shallow work has gone in. Other than mopping up revenues, there doesn't seem to be any other thing attached to this at all. I always have this constant gripe, right? I had this with someone else also on the podcast, is they said, yes, you give them more FAR, give them more floors, but give them for something they do other than just the money, right? Are you creating more public spaces? Let's say you create more public spaces in front of your thing. You pay for a metro, you pay for something else, and you allow that space to be utilized. Maybe you will be incentivized with something else. You create more parks and public spaces, you get a few more, right? There doesn't seem to be any strings attached other than money, right? This seems to be, how would you look at something like that? Why didn't they think of anything more? What are the best practices in this? Why just give FAR, take the money, and we are done? And the money shall be used to, like they said, to me, it appears to me that they want to put a wide road for them, and they want to pay the land acquisition cost for that wide road to that property.
Could in the outskirts. Also,
it could be. I'm just reading it. It's a conspiracy theory from my side. But that's how it usually happens. There's a big property coming. They need a wide road for the extra FAR. You pay for that through this extra 60%, and I'll widen the road for you.
Yeah. So, as you rightly said, that, see, the thing is, okay, even if you're going to mop up revenues with it, what are you going to do with that money? How are you accountable? Is it improving? I'm not even saying where that money is going. I'm saying the ultimate goal of any government is to ease the everyday living of its citizens. And that is all the citizens, not just a handful of citizens, right? So are we moving towards that goal? Are we saying that the city, which is, and currently we are going through it, where there is such a bad water crisis, do we have the infrastructure to service people staying in all parts of the city, right? If not, what are we doing to provision that infrastructure? These are the fundamental questions. Okay, let us say that you mop up some revenue. Who is accountable? Where is that money going? How is it going to impact the living of people like you and me also? right? None of that is thought through. So to even go back to your initial question of saying, is it good or bad? It depends on with what lens you actually are putting this out. If it is only to collect revenue, fair enough. We have to test it out and see. I don't have any way to refute the claim that in Mangalore it was giving you 2,000, 3,000 crores. It may give you, for instance. Mahadevpura, today only I was seeing in the paper that it has given them 1,000 crore extra of property tax, or something like that. And maybe in Mahadevpura, where 18% of these big builders or building plan sanctions happened for 4 floors and above, maybe a lot of revenue comes in from that zone. But what are you going to do with that revenue? That has also not been spelled out. It hasn't been further, details on what do we do with it? How do we go about it? How is it going to actually improve life in the city? Who is going to steer it? Who is going to direct it? None of that is there, right? And you do need a master plan. I go back to it. I mean, this is a planning tool. It cannot operate in the vacuum of a plan. So how are we connecting these things also? So I think it's very uninformed is what I can say. And we have to wait and watch, but there is no data that is available also, and I'm not too sure if it'll ever come up on the websites for public consumption to say what is this, how many people sought it out, what was the premium FAR, what was the amount that came in, where is it being put into? Is there any discussion on that? None. You cannot. And what is the guiding tool for it? Do I know today where the city is growing? Have we mapped it? Do you know where the infrastructure requirement is? No, because we don't have a plan.
Anybody ask anywhere, we will give it to you as long as it is
as long as it gives me money, and then okay, I will see. But I am really not sure about how much money it is going to give. As I said, from their own data, only 5% of those are 4 floors and above. But that data is also not complete. Of course, a lot of the development that is happening outside the BBMP in the BDA area, there is no data available. I mean, we tried to get that data from the BDA, but we were unsuccessful.
So coming from a planning tool, you very clearly see that this has not been thought through from a planning angle. It is not providing any guidance for where we need to do this. It is not providing any other further incentives on how it can be done. All they say is it will follow the Karnataka transparency. It will be done in an electronic mode and whatever that Gandhi, what is that thing called again?
The
Gandhi Sakshi Kayaka software that has been implemented. We have to make it mandatory to use that software to do this. And compel that the fund should not be used for repair. So they're just trying to create a separate account for this and put it there.
Yes.
And they're trying to do that. But it's so not thought through in so many unintended consequences that it has. Why would they pass a bill just for the money? Is it that desperate that they just need to? And like you're saying, it's less than 5%. So why do we have to say it fetched that 2,000 crore there, and they just have, okay, it should at least fetch 2,000 crore here is all I think they're looking at, but they're not looking at where this is coming up, what is going to happen, how can we incentivize people to do better infrastructure. Like you said, there is water, there are so many utilities they can pay for. That has not been specified. It's such a shallow bill that while it is true that you might get higher and taller buildings, beyond that and beyond the money that they might get, and there's so much of discretionary things in this, who's going to get it, who's not going to get it, right? If you ask for it, are you mandatorily giving? Will they leave the small plots out of this? Is there any incentives to bring them in?
The small plots will get left out because there is absolutely no consequence of any violations in this city, right?
Why didn't they think through that? Why did they say that 95% of the thing is being left out? How can we make this bill stronger to get to them? And how do we regularize that?
And that is what is actually building the city. That's our dominant mode of urbanization. The small developer, right? He's the one who's dominantly adding to the built fabric, to the built footprint. He's the one that is supplying, for example, adding to the housing segment. So, when I just go back to, I remember Dr. Ravindra was the one who, in Yavaneka, we had and this was many, many years ago, I would say 20 years ago, when the premium FAR was, the idea was first rolled out and there was a discussion, he put it out there. And this was my question to him. I said, Why do you think anybody will buy a premium FAR when they know that without buying they can still construct in this city, right? So some of the things that we were trying to push at one point with the government was that your regularization fee, and that's how you rope in the smaller developer. We are creating not just an unhealthy environment in the way the development is happening, but we are also creating a very unsafe development. Unsafe built fabric expansion. A 30-40 plot which has 8 houses on it. And you can see, you walk into an average street, 8 meters you can see over there. Each of those, there is no, even today, the bigger plots are not keeping space for parking because they can park on the road. They want to maximize on the land that they have purchased. Each of those houses will have 2 cylinders. Imagine if something happens, right? So I'm giving a very basic commonsensical thing first. Second, I'm feeling that, so what we had said was that the regularization fee has to be, it should pinch the violator, right? So number one, keep it very sharp. Number two, his utility bills, power and water. These are the ones that have to be graded in such a way that what he is paying is more than the rental he is getting. Then you are actually saying that I will rope in the smaller developer, the violator, and see how the city can gain from that, right? So, and that's a starting point to actually get to, in some ways, contain development or steer development. I won't say contain development, but right now that's not the thinking at all. And if you were to say, okay, I am going to, on the fringes, the big developers are going with these high rises and they'll come to me. How do we know which direction this is happening? Are we even putting it on a map and looking at the city as a whole and looking at the developer from the point of view of this expansion of the city? Yeah. Of another point which I wanted to bring out over here is that, for example, let's take this whole idea of transit-oriented development.
Correct. Right? Let's talk about that.
So we want to have high density mixed land use next to the transit corridors. We want people to use the transit and not get onto there. I mean, these are the very fundamentals of a TOD, transit oriented development. So what the government or what a planner does is that says that 500 meters on either side of your transit corridor or the station, you will have premium FAR of 4. The government could, so that's where, if there is an FAR that is available, which has to be bought, it can be directed to that. Provided that the plots where the development is happening can actually exhaust the premium FAR. On the outskirts, that's possible because you may have larger plots. Now, in the city, that's not possible. I mean, a 30-40 or a 60-40 plot, let's say the Nanda Theatre Road where your metro is going. How are you going to exhaust a 4 FAR? And even if you go in for amalgamation, the price of land is so high that you will only do luxury development. So you're leaving the transit user out of that whole development, right? So I think it's contrary to a lot of the larger goals of cities working for everyone. I won't even use the word plan. Yeah.
I think this is really sad, no? Is that we have missed an opportunity that when we think of, if you just use real estate as a milking cow the way it is, this is what you get. If we use this as a planning tool and sat and wrote this down and thought through a little more and added a few more clauses as to how we are going to solve all, any policy that is written needs to go through all of these things, write down the unintended. This is a perfect example of how public policy should not be done. And all the policy students who are listening to this should be sitting down and saying, write down the unintended consequences. What are the things that can happen because of this? How are you going to solve these problems? And try to find solutions to as many as possible. This is just a milking cow bill, which is just going to get them not even as much as they think, but whatever it is. Anything more than 0 is good enough for them. And they just went ahead and did it. And I think they're just going to have, I don't see how this is going to solve anything. While at the face of it, everybody likes tall buildings. But there are so many things and the nuances that you're talking about has been left out. But how would you improve this? Where do you think it can go from here? It is already there. They're going to milk it. They're going to continue to do this. what can be done now? All the time we seem to be firefighting, and you are on the table on that. All
Yeah.
you seem to be left holding the
Al-
ball on how do we fix this. You are holding on to a master plan which has no relevance to this thing. It is being done somewhere separately. No linkage to the master plan. No updation of that.
Nothing whatsoever. So what is going to happen? Let's say right now you put this out, and let's say a Mahadevpura or a North Zone or a West Zone, a lot of developers come in and they say, okay, we want a premium FAR, we are going to utilize it, and we're going to give these tall buildings. We are adding housing stock to the city, let's assume, right? When I start to prepare the master plan next, I am reacting to that. I'm bringing
Yep.
those areas into my local planning area. That's why you see these little humps in our boundaries, right? Now this is already developed, let's bring it in. So that's how and our master plans have become nothing but they're not proactive anymore because cities are exercises in real estate development.
Yep.
And that's the fundamental change we have to bring. If the government, okay, let's say you want to mop up the revenue through this. I'm saying even the whole regularization, the violations that are happening, those need to be looked into. I cannot say, because if I give a suggestion, there may be unintended consequences of that also. It has to be scientifically and evidence based decisions have to be taken as to how do we actually rope in the development that is already occurring and how do we curtail some of the undesirables, because the tall building is fantastic, I would love to live in it, but the moment I leave my compound and get onto a tiny service road where I'm stuck now for next 20 minutes just negotiating a junction, no, that is definitely not desirable. And that's when the newspapers start to report about traffic snarls, this, that, people are unhappy, people are doing this, people are doing that. I mean, true, we are pushing people to, in many ways, I think the average citizen has become completely fine with the idea that I will have this as soon as I step into my workplace and my home. I'm okay that in between 2 hours here and there, I have to bear with this nonsense. And nobody is seeming to question. We have to. There is a way of selling the premium FARs and consuming them. So those zones have to be earmarked. The smaller developer has to be roped in. There are no ready-made answers to these. We need to think through this very carefully. Most importantly, we need to map the city and say where is development happening, where is it, how should we direct it, and what are the tools that we want to put to. There's a lot of noise around the TDR, for example, that this premium FAR renders the TDR tool very weak, right?
Does it?
That's what the newspapers are saying. But my question is, where has TDR worked in this city? It's been a huge failure. The transfer of development rights is also something similar, right? So did the government even think of that? And the TDR itself just has fallen flat on its face because it has not really worked. From the little research that I have done and what I've read, it's not worked. So I'm not sure how this is also going to work, the premium FAR bit.
We leave it at that. We hope that people realize that you can't just take this for granted and start understanding the nuances in these things. We are not saying it is good or bad, with like how we started the question. There is good and the bad, and a proper plan takes into account both of these things and brings them together. Thanks, Anjali, for spending the time and explaining this nicely enough. I want to get you back on property tax sometime soon.